So we'll move directly into the questions, and I think the first one that's received the most interest, and I might direct it, Michael, to yourself first, and then John, I'd be interested to hear your view on it as well. So it's around how do EirGrid and the CRU plan to firm up ECP grid connections as is envisaged under the Clean Energy Package?
I think, in fairness, John is probably a better place to answer it, considering
Michael.
Experience
So I'm not sure that it's correct to say that the Clean Energy Package envisages firming up connections. It just talks about a difference between payments for those who are firm and those who are non-firm. I may have misread it, but I'm not sure it does envisage that. I think getting competitive outcomes from auctions probably requires that at some point in time. I think firming up is likely to require grid investment. It is difficult to build wires on this island. It takes time and patience. So I think I can possibly, that's as close to an answer as you'll get from me. But I can say there's another question down there that just says what sort of budgetary revisions are you likely to see in presumably the transmission development plan to facilitate 70 by 30, major question mark. I think elements of that will depend upon, obviously, the firmness of the path towards moving to firmness, flex tech, hybrid locations, hybrid use of existing connections, the amount that comes from offshore, who builds that offshore, whether the offshore grid is built by the developers. So a lot of different people will be deciding on investments. So it's we will see in part in PR5, but I think it's clear that the level of non-firm connections is something that has to be considered very carefully if what we all want is least cost transition to a low carbon future. I'm pretty confident I didn't answer your question, but that's as much as I can say, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose maybe to develop the question a little bit further, it's the fact that the offers that are issuing through the ECP process currently and some of the non-GPA offers that issued prior to that were all on a non-firm basis. Yeah. So I think in industry, we're really keen to see when the system operators are going to look at how, what is needed from a network development point of view and to engage with industry around that. So I think maybe to develop the question a bit further, Michael, for you.
It's a fair question. It's something we're looking at, but it's a challenge in terms of trying to balance that and the auction and the competition and everything else together. We set ourselves a target of January to have an understanding of how that can evolve over time. Okay. Not just for this, but we have no firm plan on that at the moment.
And I suppose it does make it really difficult for developers because, as you're building your financial model, as you're making decisions over, accepting your connection agreement, the level of constraints and the longevity of those is an essential part in that. So that's, how we're struggling around, that aspect and not having any sight of what your plans are around that.
Margaret, fully understand that, and I suppose maybe a point I was trying to make sure in the presentation earlier is that we recognise if there has to be an incentive there and there has to be some assurance there for you to go and get the funding you need for the projects. So that's where we need to look at all of that between now and 2030. But we can't just focus on the 2030, but we recognise we need to be looking at the next couple of years, otherwise no one's going to have any faith in the market. So we in EirGrid do recognise that. I think the CRU recognise that as well, and it's a case of saying, how do we put the plan together to make that work? Because the last thing we want is a situation where people don't have faith in that, and then we're in a situation where there's nobody investing in the market.
I think some of what Rory said is relevant in the sense that if things can be done to keep curtailment down, then that's one less loss of revenue. Even if your connection isn't deemed firm at a point in time, there is, I think, and Rory is one of the providers of this intelligence, there is intelligence out there as to where would be a good place to build and where would be a bad place to build in terms of the likelihood of constraints happening in the particular area. And I think there can be incentives on EirGrid to, through the incentive mechanisms in PR5, to give EirGrid a stake in the game as well, in order to either bring the position of de jure firmness closer in time, or have targets as to when that happens, but to make better information out for the likes of Rory and others, to give an indication of good places and bad places to build. But I think we all have to recognise this is not the easiest democracy in the world in which to build wires.
And I think with IWEA, we are going to look at just different areas that we can work with you and make some suggestions and recommendations around all of this in the PR5 submission from IWEA.
And I know I'm maybe not labouring the point. I'm coming up with a slightly better answer than my first answer, I hope. There is an incentive on all the policymakers to try and to reduce the risk that developers see in competing in the auctions. And the reason for that is it should give better auction outcomes, and to give better information to those who are competing in the auctions, because otherwise people will price in uncertainty, and if they're not the people with the best information, then you'll pay more than you have to. So other than avoiding answering difficult questions like this once every year or twice a year, there is a real incentive on all of us to try and get better information out to you guys so you can price it better, and to try and bring forward the dates of de jure firmness as opposed to just better information on de facto near firmness. I'll stop now.
Okay. There's a question, sorry, I seem to have lost it, for Rory, just to take the attention off yourself, John, for a minute. So Rory, are wind and solar complementary, or will it add to curtailment when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining?
I suppose simply when you add any generation onto the system now, it will add to curtailment. That is a fact, and you do get windy, sunny days. But when you look at from a sort of an optimum curtailment mix for 70% in 2030, because there is somewhat of an inverse correlation between wind resource and solar resource, having solar in the system will get us to the 70% with lower curtailment. So it's definitely got a good positive solar in the mix in terms of meeting the 70% target.
I guess the other thing that's helpful for solar is that the output of solar is correlated with demand. So you end up with solar output at periods when you generally have high demand during the day. So I don't know whether you find the same, Rory, and we certainly find in our analysis that that's definitely a helpful feature for solar.
Okay, thanks. Mark, there's a question there for you. When you talk about batteries, small and large scale, what duration at rated capacity are you modelling?
Yeah, so there's actually two different types of batteries that we've been looking at in our study. So the energy market participating batteries, so the 1.7 gigawatts that we had in the scenario, they are slightly larger storage capacity batteries. So they will be roughly 2-hour duration batteries on average. In terms of the batteries that you need to provide reserve, we think you can provide what's needed with essentially a half-hour battery, and you would certainly be providing primary reserve, secondary reserve, and TOR 1 with that, and some negative reserve as well. So we've looked certainly in our modelling and in the costings that I had there at a half-hour battery for that.
Thanks, Mark. And I think the next question, Michael, for you. What large transmission projects are EirGrid actively progressing in ROI at present? This will be essential for our 70 by 30.
So at the moment, the projects that we're progressing are particularly around Dublin, CP966 and CP1021. And they're basically looking at how we can reinforce the network around Dublin with a specific view to get more power into Dublin, which is a big challenge in terms of and will relieve a number of the constraints. North Connacht has gone out to consultation last week with a view of trying to progress the 110 kV line that we were we need to progress from a wind development point of view in that part of the country. Currently working on a cross-channel cable. I have a number of projects looking at upgrading a number of lines around the country, and a lot of substation refurbishment, which will give us greater capacity to maximise the flow of electricity around the system, and again to try and reduce the inefficiencies that are there in the system. They're the main projects, besides some legacy projects such as North-South, which are waiting on some positive feedback from the authorities in Northern Ireland in the new year, and also trying to progress some other legacy projects like Laois Kilkenny.
And if people are interested in the details around these projects, it's
All of those
available.
projects I've mentioned are actually up on the website.
Great. I might finish the questions there at that point, and just to invite Pat Brett, the Vice Chair of IWEA, to the stage for some closing remarks, and as he's coming to the stage, please, to show your appreciation for the final set of speakers.